Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you, Joe, again for inviting me to Glenties. The last time I was here was 2 years ago, and I recall my husband actually drove up with me, and when we got as far as Glenties, I invited him to come in to maybe listen and put in the time, and he said, "No, thanks very much, I'll go for a walk up and go for a walk around." My daughter came with me this time, and I made the same invitation when we were getting out of the car, and guess what? She said, "No, thank you, Mum. I'll read. I'll do something." So I don't think it's in here. I think it may be what they don't want to hear anymore. They just need to get away from the message. So I think that the title of the session that we're going to talk about tonight is how to manage the recovery now and into the future. Begs the question, I believe, as to how economic policy will evolve in the coming years and how it can contribute to a different vision and model for Ireland in the long term. And just looking back very, very briefly, we know that for the past decades, Ireland has been subjected to a system of neoliberal economics dominant in the English-speaking world. And the main policies of this dogma were to promote free trade, eliminate regulation, encourage wealth creators, let the market decide, reduce the role of trade unions and collective bargaining. And we have all witnessed, at least, considerable hardship and damage that this has visited on the lives of citizens and their families in this country. Thousands lost their jobs and their livelihoods. Thousands had to leave their families behind and emigrate. Thousands lost income and their homes, and some even lost their lives. I experienced that in my own family in the last 2 years, and there is nobody, unless you have experienced it, will be able to say the hurt and the devastation that brings when it happens, particularly, but not exclusively, particularly in the lives of a young person. So the debate leading up to the next general election needs to be informed by a vision of what sort of society we envisage and how we're going to achieve it. Income inequality is a complex topic, and the solutions can't be reduced to a single answer. And it may take many elections, and decades even, to fundamentally change the economic and social landscape. But in my opinion, a progressive political agenda needs to focus on at least 4 issues. And I have identified those 4 issues as living standards, employment, public services and provision, and housing. What counts in terms of people's economic and living conditions is access to employment and access to public services, but access to an economy that is dynamic and is based on enterprise. And a key problem in relation to living standards in Ireland is that we have an unbalanced structure in our economy with over-reliance on the foreign direct investment, and as a consequence, a low labour share of income to national income. And add this to growing inequality in wages. Tasks tell us that 50% of all workers in Ireland earn 28,000 or less. 2/3 of them earn 35,000 or less. And the OECD tell us that 20% of all workers are classified as low paid. 345,000 people fall into the category of the working poor. And this puts a huge strain on public services and finances, and also leaves us exposed in the event of international shocks. Social welfare payments and eligibility were lowered and tightened during the recession, and poverty rose as a direct result and consequence to those welfare cuts. Reform of the social welfare system and a movement to reduce and eventually abolish low pay goes hand in hand with the establishment of the principle and practice of a living income that allows all persons and households to live with dignity. This aspiration should surely not be regarded as an unrealistic prospect in a relatively rich and prosperous country like Ireland. The establishment of the Low Pay Commission is a policy statement in this direction, even if its first outcome is the subject of debate. And boy, would I love to say something more about that, but guess what? I am bound to confidentiality, so I have to live with that. The most recent announcement even by the British Chancellor of the Exchequer when he was announcing the budget 2 weeks ago in the UK, he announced the implementation of a mandatory implementation of a living wage. Now that was, some describe it as one of the greatest political stunts ever pulled, and they could be right. What I note here is the concept of the living wage. The concept was being accepted by a very conservative party, very conservative. And there isn't any point in mentioning that without mentioning the very strong downward pressure that he also mentioned in the measures on welfare recipients. So unemployment, creating employment and full employment means creating enough jobs, enough well-paid jobs to sustain individuals' families and communities. And to put it maybe as the Taoiseach did at the recent National Economic Dialogue, anybody who wants a job can get one. Well, this will require a coordinated strategy and an approach to strategic investment, to banking, to lending to firms, to upskilling, and a growth in new forms of economic activity, including cooperative activity and community enterprise. And that is why we in ICTU are proposing the establishment of a strategic infrastructure bank as a vehicle to provide investment in areas such as sustainable energy, further development of the transport network, development of broadband and the supply of affordable housing. We think all of that could be channelled through the infrastructure bank. And it is why we also support the development and the expansion of apprenticeship schemes to sectors of the economy where they are traditionally not available. And I might just dwell on that piece for a little tiny bit. My own judgment is that the education system, which is a good quality education system in this country, I think very few people would argue you get top class at primary, post-primary and indeed at third level. But not every young person either wants to or can, economically in their own families or otherwise, go through third level. And the options for those young people, and as I say, I experienced it in my own family, the options when it comes to a blank wall are really bad. And the whole objective of an apprenticeship scheme on a dual learning basis, like they have in Germany, like they have in Finland and Denmark, the whole idea is that you give good quality options to young people in the education system, which takes them to a place that they have a very recognisable, very well recognised qualification, and that they can stand proud that they have gone a different route, but they have got that qualification, and they can also go through to the technical piece or the third level piece if they want to. We have had, that has caused, the lack of that has caused huge, in my opinion, devastation in some cases to young people, but certainly hasn't given them all of the options that they should have. And we really, by virtue of the establishment of that apprenticeship council, which I'm currently on myself, one of the tasks has been getting the construction fraternity, both unionised and the unions, as well as the employers, to say apprenticeships is about more than construction. Get it into hospitality, get it into the healthcare system, get healthcare assistants going through a piece of very good quality training will take you into a place where you will never see an Oris Attracte again. That's what that will do. And so I take time out to to just mention that, because I think it's extremely important in our society that we do that. So moving towards full employment means creating full and part-time jobs with a living income and proper conditions. And we have to move away from the business model whereby precarious work is the norm, and where workers are exploited and abused, and labour is effectively commodified. Very often employers want to deny that this behaviour goes on, but we only have to refer to the recent Cleary's dispute or the Dunnes Stores episode to identify how real this experience is for many workers. And while there has been a public outcry, until we make changes to the company law to ensure that those things never happen again, rest assured it's only a question of when will the next episode be. And when you think about it, just in relation to the episode in Cleary's, what sort of a mind does it take of a person or persons at director level who will walk into a room somewhere in Dublin or London or America or wherever it happened, because we can't identify what room they were in, and who will walk into a room and do business dealings within 12 hours, at the stroke of a pen, wipe out the lives of 420 workers, 139 of them who were direct employees in Cleary's and who had given up to 44 years service. And this individual with our cohorts walks into a room, didn't bother her, nothing, gone. All those families devastated. And the state has to pay millions to pay their statutory redundancy. So we believe strongly that the government has to ensure that company law dictates that that can never happen again, and that if someone like her goes into a room and does it again, then there is a price to be paid, which is, well, if you do that, you'll never be a director, or you certainly won't be a director for a period of time. And that's why we're saying that that should be the case. In the case of public services, Ireland's population is growing, and a higher proportion are over 65. And an expanded, accountable and efficient public service is essential. Healthcare provision is strongly challenged by virtue of the fact that 23% of all Irish adults have neither medical cards nor private health insurance to help them with their healthcare costs. Enhancing the quality and coverage of public childcare services, including the early child education and care for the 2 to 4-year-old age group, should be a priority in a progressive economy. And anybody in the room who was at the National Economic Dialogue will know that no matter what session you attended, childcare and the childcare needs into the future featured very strongly. So such a policy pays dividends to society over the long term, but also in the immediate term, employers whose skilled needs can be maintained by their ability to attain their workforce in their employment also have dividend from it. And a key to funding a European level of public service will be an expanded and properly resourced social insurance fund. And as a first step in a phased approach, this could involve raising the employer rate of social insurance by 3 percentage points on all wages above 100,000 per annum, and the funds there we have costed would raise 150 million, and that should be hypothecated to the delivery of childcare services. On housing, it's beyond debate that any properly functioning economy should have the ability to provide affordable accommodation to all citizens who need it. And in 2014, residential property prices rose by 13%, with wages only beginning to recover in many sectors of the economy. This strong price growth is putting home ownership out of reach for an increasing proportion of the population. And the numbers of people seeking state supports to meet their housing needs has risen considerably. Social housing policy must address the twin goals of making affordable housing available to a significant share of the population while increasing the stock of homes in well-designed, sustainable neighbourhoods available to those on lower incomes. The traditional model of funding social housing is in need of reform, and a new approach that takes account of the constraints on government borrowing and a commitment to continue to reduce the deficit over coming years is required. The recently announced housing strategy committed €400 million to a new housing finance entity, which we believe should be structured as an off-the-books investment body with a further €500 million injection responsible for not just the financing but the provision of social and affording housing. So it is easy to criticise what is wrong. To outline, substantiate, develop and argue for an alternative political economy in Ireland will require understanding, wisdom, perseverance and leadership if we are to effect a fundamental shift in thinking and behaviour. And this will be required of the trade union movement as well. It may mean arguing for a reform of our taxation system so that our overall level of revenue is adequate to provide services at a European level. It will mean arguing for a threshold of decency where all workers have a living wage, not just in terms of pay per hour, but hours of work per week and income per year and decent conditions, as we ourselves have set out in our own recent charter that we developed. And it may mean developing a strong indigenous exporting platform for Irish enterprises so we can wean ourselves gradually off our dependence on the FDI sector for exports and innovations, and indeed prepare ourselves for the possible effects of TTIP. It may mean dealing with the issues of common consolidated tax base across Europe to ensure corporations pay their fair share of taxation, and it may also mean gradually moving towards a more European level of social insurance to provide for the health and childcare needs and protect our incomes and protect us when we are sick and protect and give us pensions when we retire. I don't think that there is any doubt but that we are at a crossroads, and citizens and workers deserve responsibility and participation in the decisions that shape their future. The trade union movement can play a leading role in shaping this public debate. And as I mentioned earlier, the forces promoting the neoliberal ideologies do not give up easily, and they will not stop until almost all public assets have been put up for sale, wages driven down and employment conditions restructured or flexibilised to the point of surrender. But our task is to stand firm in the promotion of a wage-led recovery and a strategic programme of investment, and we should also press home the message that public debt is not sustainable for Greece or for Ireland, and that a programme of write-down and rescheduling is necessary. Finally, I would say to you, friends, even the IMF and the OECD concede that there is enough evidence to show that societies that promote equality can achieve high levels of growth and productivity. And I leave you with this last thought, and you can work out who you think said it yourselves. The world has sufficient to provide for its people's needs, but not their greed. Thank you very much for listening to me.